Donald Trump has a way of saying a lot of crazy and incoherent things, and he's such a genius at it that people can parody him pretty much by just playing a tape of what he says. And recently, the recent example of this is his quite amazing statement that the concept of chokeholds sounds so innocent, so perfect. That is a very strange statement. It sounds like something that an insane murderer would say after he's been arrested for choking hundreds of people to death. They finally caught the serial killer, and he was a complete madman. And as he was being arrested, he raved, "The concept of chokehold sounds so innocent, so perfect." And it's something right out of Silence of the Lambs or some kind of horror movie. But Trump keeps putting his foot in his mouth because he has supreme confidence in himself, and yet he is not a rigorous and systematic thinker by any means. He can ad lib reasonably well by the standards of sort of an average person, but his ad libs, as he makes up his speeches as he goes along, they fly all over the map. And then he ends up saying these bizarre things that then can be highlighted by the media, which, of course, for the most part, doesn't like him too much. So if we were to unpack this whole issue of Trump and Black Lives Matter and the choking death of George Floyd and its implications, I think there's a whole lot that can be said here. Trump is trying to position himself as the law and order candidate to get the key voters in the swing states on his side again in the next elections. He's currently trailing by Joe Biden by 10 points. Anybody trailing Joe Biden by 10 points is not doing very well. And Trump, I think, perhaps he or his advisors think that if the chaos in the United States continues to accelerate, it might reach a point where a law and order candidate would actually get those swing voters. So maybe that's the political method behind Trump's apparent madness. But at a deeper level, this whole media hoopla around George Floyd and the police killings of Black people, which have been going on for years and years and years with varying amounts of mainstream coverage. It seems that the mainstream gets most excited when a relatively unsavory individual is killed. And there have been some very much more saintly people who've been murdered by police to virtually no mainstream coverage. It's very strange how that works. The mainstream media seems to be part of a propaganda operation that is trying to change the conversation right now from what really matters, which is that the most powerful banking cabal in the world, the people who essentially own and operate the government of the United States, the West, and much of the world, just stole at least $7 trillion, primarily from poorer people. In the COVID lockdown, which destroyed small businesses all over the world, which is starving poor people all over the world, and which led to the printing of unlimited money for the world's biggest, wealthiest bankers. It bailed them out of their debt crisis. It gave them the right to give themselves and their friends as much money as they want by printing it out of thin air, and they are doing that even as we speak. There was a corporate bailout at the level of trillions for the friends of Steve Mnuchin. He and his Zionist buddies have an unlimited credit line that they never have to pay back. It's basically just a bailout slush fund. And so this is the biggest robbery in the history of the world. And ordinary people are suffering horribly. They were locked down and they felt like they couldn't breathe. Their economic lives have been destroyed. They feel like they couldn't breathe. And so then suddenly, just at the moment when they should have risen up in revolt and stormed Wall Street, stormed Washington, D.C., and overthrown these thieves who just conducted the biggest robbery in the history of the world, suddenly this conversation changes to race, and the ordinary working white people and Black people are being turned against each other, talking about race rather than this robbery conducted under the premeditated pretext of the COVID pandemic, which was almost certainly manufactured in a biological warfare lab under the direction of the very bankers who have stolen 6, 7, or more trillion dollars based on this pandemic, which they obviously plotted out in great detail ahead of time as part of an effort for them to centralize their wealth and power, to stop the rise of China by blowing up the globalized world economy that is the engine of China's rise, and to allow them to impose a top-down police state on the people of the West so they can be ready to continue to centralize and strengthen their control of the West and the world. That's what COVID really was, and they've changed the conversation to race so that we don't notice it.